All right, let's dive right in. We're going to talk about something absolutely epic today, the story of the largest single land empire in all of history. And it all started, believe it or not, on the huge, windy plains of East Asia. So just to kick things off, let's try to wrap our heads around the scale here. At its peak, the Mongol Empire stretched across 24 million square kilometers. I mean, that number is it's staggering. It was absolutely massive. And that number, 24 million square kilometers, what does that actually look like? Well, imagine this. It stretched all the way from Korea to Ukraine, from Siberia down to southern China. It literally connected the East and the West like never before, all under one ruler. Absolutely unprecedented. Okay, so how on earth did this superpower come from, seemingly nowhere? To get that, we've got to rewind. We're going back to the 12th century, to this world of nomads on the East Asian steppe. This is way before the empire was even a glimmer of an idea. Life out there was all about movement, you know. People lived in these felt tents, and they were always on the go, following the seasons with their herds of sheep, cattle, and camels. And what's super interesting is the role of women. They had some serious power. They managed the herds, the trade, the whole migration. Meanwhile, the men were focused on warfare, becoming masters of the horse and bow, constantly raiding other tribes. So you've got this backdrop of pretty much constant fighting between all these different groups. But this whole world of scattered, warring tribes, it was about to be turned completely upside down. And it was all because of one person, a young man born right into the middle of all this chaos. His name was Temujin. Now, Temujin's childhood was anything but easy. It was a brutal fight just to stay alive. Yeah, he was born into a noble family, but he ended up an orphan, totally cast out, scraping by in the harshest conditions. But this guy, through pure force of will and by making some incredibly smart alliances, he starts this unbelievable climb to the top. So you gotta ask, what was his secret? How did he pull it off? Well, Temujin's genius really came down to three big game-changing ideas. First, he promoted people based on merit, on how good they were, not who their dad was. That was huge. Second, he shared the spoils of war equally with all his soldiers. You can bet that bought him a lot of loyalty. And maybe the most brilliant move of all, when he conquered a tribe, he broke it up, scattered the people. Why? So they couldn't band together and rebel later. Genius. With these strategies, he just became an unstoppable force. And by 1206, he did what everyone thought was impossible. He united all the nomads of the steppe. And that's when he was given a new name, Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. So now he's got this massive unified force. But what do you do with it? Well, a new and powerful idea started to take hold. A kind of divine mission that was about to fuel an age of conquest like the world had never seen. You see, the Mongols had their own beliefs, and their chief god was Tengri, the eternal sky god. And somehow, this belief emerged that Tengri had given Genghis Khan and his people a job to do, a divine mandate, really. And that job was to conquer the entire world in Tengri's name. This idea created a really simple and incredibly brutal logic. If you resisted the Mongols, you weren't just fighting an army. Oh no, you were defying the will of God. And for that crime, there was only one punishment: death. It's as simple and terrifying as that. And with that belief lighting a fire under them, the conquests began. And the pace was just breathtaking. Under Genghis Khan himself, they took northern China and the eastern Islamic states. After he died, his kids and grandkids just kept going. They swept through Central Asia and Russia in the 1230s, smashed European armies in 1241, sacked Baghdad in the 50s, and finally took all of southern China by 1279. Think about that. An entire continent completely redrawn in just a few decades. Okay, but here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. It gets really complex. Because for all the unbelievable brutality of their conquests, what was life like inside the empire once it was established? Well, it was a completely different story. This was an empire of major contradictions. This is the great Mongol paradox, right? On one hand, their way of conquering was total war. If a city resisted, it was wiped off the map. But on the other hand, the way they governed was incredibly practical. So what gives? Well, the brutality was basically psychological warfare. Surrender now or we will erase you. It made conquering faster. But once they had you, they got pragmatic. You can't get taxes from a pile of rubble, right? So they kept local leaders in charge. They allowed religious freedom. You could worship whoever you wanted, as long as you prayed for the Khan. And they absolutely loved skilled artisans, moving them all over the empire to where their skills could be used best. And this stability, which historians call the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, it had some incredible results. For the first time, most of Eurasia was united and safe to travel. The old Silk Road just exploded with trade, protected by this amazing Pony Express-style relay system for messengers and merchants. Sea trade boomed, and you got this massive cross-pollination of ideas and art. That famous blue and white porcelain? That's a blend of Chinese pottery and Iranian cobalt dye, made possible by the empire. Gunpowder from China started spreading west. You had these incredible luxury goods like gold brocade made by weavers from Baghdad using Chinese silk. It was, in a way, the first real era of globalization. But, as we all know, golden ages don't last forever. And this incredible unity, well, it couldn't hold. The empire itself, in its very DNA, had the seeds of its own destruction. So what was the big problem? It all came down to succession. Who gets to be the next great Khan? See, it didn't just go to the oldest son. Any male descendant of Genghis Khan could make a claim. And that was the fatal flaw. It led to these horrible civil wars between his grandsons in the 1260s, with each one trying to become the top dog. And all that fighting, it just tore the empire apart. It fractured the whole thing into 4 new, separate states, which we call khanates. So in the east, you got the Yun dynasty ruling China. Out west in Persia, you had the Il Khanate. Smack in the middle was the Chagatai Khanate. And then over in Eastern Europe was the famous Golden Horde. But the story doesn't just stop there. Not at all. Each one of these 4 khanates went on to create its own incredible, lasting legacy that really helped shape the world we live in today. The Yuan dynasty in China, it was a golden age for science and culture. The Il Khanate in Iran produced some of the most beautiful architecture and art. From the Chagatai Khanate came the ancestors of the Mongol Empire in India. And the Golden Horde's long reign, it actually set the stage for Moscow to become a new powerhouse. So you see, the Mongol Empire didn't just vanish, it transformed. Which kind of leaves us with this one big thought, doesn't it? Even though the unified empire itself didn't last all that long, the changes it brought, the connections it forged, the scale is just mind-blowing. It completely redrew the map of the world. And when you think about it, in terms of its sheer size and influence, has any single nation, to this day, ever been able to match it? It was a brutal, yes, but also a brilliant empire that absolutely changed the course of history forever.